Welcome to the Educating Mindfully Learncast, where we support mental health and well-being in education through mindfulness-based learning. Our Learncast is like a podcast, but with connected, reflective learning in our online community, which also has the opportunity for educators to earn professional development hours. This Learncast is a special experience for mindful educators and leaders to personally grow their practices within and beyond education as mindful global citizens. Before we begin, we invite you to pause where you are for an invitational intention. Perhaps placing your hands on your heart. And together we will take 4 collective breaths, 1 breath for each ripple within our framework's educational ecosystem. Breathing in first for ourselves, and exhale. Next, breathing in for our staff, and exhale. Then breathing in for our students, and exhale. And breathing in for society as a whole, including families and communities. And exhale. Consider pausing and committing to yourself a collective intention by saying, I am a mindful global citizen. We look forward to learning with you as we continue educating mindfully together. My name is Lindsey Frank, and on behalf of our leadership team, we thank you for being you. Our episodes are supported by our mindful partners. Consider becoming a mindful partner today to be featured on an upcoming Learncast episode. Learn more at educatingmindfully.org/partners. Welcome to the Educating Mindfully Learncast, and today our episode is focused on mindful self-connection. And our episode today is the space between doing and being, reclaiming your inner connection. I am Lindsey Frank, the Educating Mindfully President, Director, and the host for today's episode. And I'm here today with Matt Weld. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you, Lindsey. I am so honored to be here.
So Matthew Weld is the Social Emotional Learning, or SEL, coach for the Illinois SEL Hub number 5, where he leads regional and statewide initiatives to strengthen educator well-being, mindfulness, and emotional resilience. Through workshops, coaching, and his weekly Jumpstart SEL newsletter, make sure you subscribe, and podcasts, he empowers educators to integrate self-awareness and regulation into their classrooms and lives. Matt also directs teachillinois.org. He chairs the New Directions in Education Conference, and he hosts the Tethered and Whole podcast. He is a registered yoga instructor, Google certified trainer, and he also was a former Educating Mindfully board member and an amazing leader. Whoop, whoop. And Matt also helps to build healthier school cultures by modeling calm leadership, compassionate communication, and mindful professional practice. So we are so grateful to have you with us here today, Matt.
Oh, thank you, Lindsey. A conversation with you is always food for the soul. So I was grateful for the invitation.
Oh, thank you. Oh, it's such a joy. So as we get started, I want to mention to our mindful community and listeners that our inspiration for this episode is from our mindfulness-based learning framework. So you can see a visual of that on our website and visiting at educatingmindfully.org. And within the framework, it basically looks like an ecosystem. And as you look, there are 4 trees. And the trees represent the main competencies within mindfulness-based learning. The first tree, when you look at this framework on the left, is where we are today, which is mindful self connection. And this reminds us that we need to have a strong self connection to enhance the other competencies, the other trees. And I also want to mention that Educating Mindfully intentionally labeled this tree as mindful self connection. Two of those words are actually, all three are very important, but specifically mindful because it requires intentionality and purpose. And also the word connection because it extends beyond the surface of just awareness and it requires a rooted connection within. So on our website, you can access our mindfulness-based learning skill progression, where you can see how mindfulness deepens and extends the current social and emotional skill development. And as I shared, you can find out more at educatingmindfully.org. So with this in mind, let's pause to just let our hearts open to our mindful self-connection, letting any of the messages resonate. And taking a breath in and breath out. And just let's see where this conversation takes us today.
I think this
So
conversation could go on for a week,
I
Lindsay.
know it could go on
Yeah.
forever, especially with mindful self-connection.
Yes.
So, in thinking about the intentionality around naming this as mindful self-connection, and for you especially, you are somebody who helps support even the development of this framework when you're on the board. Can you share a bit further? What is mindful self-connection? And how does it differ from just that basic level of self-awareness?
That is it's a great place to start. I think that let's start with self-awareness, right? Self-awareness is simply recognizing one's thoughts, right? Understanding where our emotions are, being able to name them, be understanding more about where our behaviors can come from. Mindful self-connection goes a step deeper, and it's when you get to that part you shared in that first episode of your LearnCast where you move from modeling to embodiment, right? And so when you get to the mindful self-connection, you get to the embodiment piece where you start knowing yourself in real time, right? So it's not being able to be done with a lesson and say, oh, during that lesson I felt whatever kind of way, right? But it's actually in real time saying, oh, I'm feeling this kind of way.
Yeah, and I love what you just said there, that it's knowing yourself in real time. That's just such a simple way of just bringing presence present, and that's really powerful. And so I'm curious then, if we go a little bit deeper and we peel back some more layers, and you mentioned how in that original episode we moved from modeling to embodying. You also have a way of sharing how we can move deeper from that awareness into that embodiment through like this integration progression. Can you share a little bit more about like how that could deepen even this learning further for connection?
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because when you try to explain this to people, any kind of framework, or you call it a framework or a process, and people are like, okay, if I do, it's going to be like a recipe, right? I do step one, and then I move on to step two, and then I move on to step three. And that means I'm done. If I'm on step three, that means I'm then done with step one and two, right? But this is more of a progression that you can be at any one of these stages at any time, and you can hop and skip around. The progression just means that you are that in within the sequence, each one of these steps becomes more of that embodiment piece that we're looking for with the mindful self connection.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, and how simple again. I love how right now you're bringing these really concrete examples like that recipe and how we often are like, okay, check, we've moved on, we're complete.
We love checking boxes,
And
right?
that's just not how this works.
It is not how this works. It is not how SEL works at all, right? Because, as educators, we are used to getting our curriculum and we're like, okay, chapter 1, section 1, done. Quiz, done, right? And then we move on. And we forget that this is all, it's not a linear path, right? It's kind of this sphere of like we're just living in constant soup. And so what the way I like to think of it as 5 different stages or pieces, or I don't even know if there's an English word for them, right? So the first one would be awareness, and that's what grounds you. Then the second one would be regulation, and regulation stabilizes you. The third one is reflection, which clarifies. Fourth would be compassion, that allows softening. And then finally, integration, which is where transformation happens. So those are the 5 steps to kind of this mindful self-connection summary framework progression. I don't even know what it's called.
Whatever we name it, right? It's a
System
being, right? We can
being
actually say it's being. It's that space of self and its connection when we can become aware of who we
parts. I
are,
think
right?
parts.
Yeah.
Parts is good.
Oh, yes. Right. And parts of the whole.
Yeah.
And yeah, from that awareness, then we can start cultivating the regulation within. Then from regulation, reflect, okay, how is this showing up? And what do I need to adapt or shift or change? And also knowing with that compassion that you mentioned as that next step of, okay, if I see something and I might need to shift something, can I have compassion for myself and others in that transition? And then for fully integrating it. So all of those things, parts moving and working together to create this beautiful ecosystem. And I think that's the power of the framework, the mindfulness-based learning framework, is that it all works together and is interconnected. And as you shared, it's not just a recipe, it's you can start anywhere and you can create it for whatever is needed in that community that we serve. And it all stems from the self. So ooh.
Yeah. And I think you guys were really wise in making your a metaphor an ecosystem, right? Because you can start anywhere in an ecosystem, whether it's being the former science teacher, right? You can either start with the producers at the bottom or the top tier alpha predators at the top, and it's a circle, right? It's a cycle, and everyone is connected to everything else. Yeah. So I think the metaphor of an ecosystem is brilliant.
Yeah, and even start using that in our schools. Like our schools are ecosystems. They are learning communities and they are, places where we're growing. So if we can be that garden, I think in that ecosystem, we actually have so much open space where that's where we in our own communities get to be the flowers. We in our own communities can invite the different types of creatures that may be there, but that all stems from a healthy foundation in the ecosystem and self. Um, and I mean, that really, I guess, brings us to our next question of why is mindful self connection foundational for educator well being and classroom climate and really school climate?
Well, I think that sets the tone of the room, right? Your as an educator, your internal state sets the tone of the room because actually the students' nervous systems are reflecting your nervous system, right? So if you are agitated, if you got up in the morning and a kid threw up with the flu and the dog spilled this food and your car didn't start and you get to school and you're a hot mess, right? You may have the perfect face on, but the kids are going to be able to tell. They can always tell. And
Mm.
it's nothing you said. It's just that vibe you give off. It's that nonverbal communication that you give off that my nervous system is not in check or regulated, and the kids can feel that. And because you're the person in charge, you are the main nervous system, right? You're the
Mm.
like the mainframe. The kids are feeding off of you, and their nervous system then becomes dysregulated because your nervous system is dysregulated. And so when we talk about why self connection is foundational, um, it's all about it's all about radiating that calm and fostering that sense of safety and connection and belonging that is absolutely essential when running a functional classroom.
Mhm. Yeah. And, even within that ecosystem, when we have the ripples and how self is in the middle of that lake, that is also representing that reflection, that everything within ourselves is reflected into that ecosystem and reflected back. And when we have
Mm-hmm.
that mindful self connection and we can catch those moments of, if my students or my staff are reflecting a particular quality or behavior or something, that is giving me a message within myself. And when I'm fully connected with intention, I can catch those moments to see, okay, what's my next step? And I can stay with integrity of those steps too. Um, I know you've kind of mentioned in the past about like presence and attunement and this compassionate communication. All of that stems to that mindful self connection. Do you want to, peel back any of those layers and how that continues to nurture the skill?
Well, um, I guess self awareness, I always tell people self awareness is the key to everything, right? It's the foundation. And someone said at some point or other, I don't know who actually said it, but something along the lines of awareness is the first act of freedom.
Mm.
And so, you know, an example might be when a teacher recognizes tension in themselves before class and is able to name it. And so they become attuned to their inner state, right? A strategy, people are always looking for strategies, right? So a strategy within this awareness piece might be something like a quick body scan. And some people think a body scan needs to be, like you sit in your little meditation pillow and you like start at your head and 10 minutes later you reach your toes. But it doesn't have to be that, right? It can be something as simple as just softening around your eyes or your jaw muscles, and then or sending your awareness to some place you don't normally feel, like your kneecaps or something, right? And then just anchoring yourself there in the present moment and realizing that between stimulus and response, we have choice. So,
Yeah, very powerful. And, sometimes we don't always get to hear like the word attunement in education. And so, just putting it out there as well, like think about that word tune. And I play the violin. And so I like to think of that as like we're attuning to ourselves. So when we can tune an instrument, we're becoming um, basically that harmony with ourselves. So when we
mm-hmm.
can be present, we can to attune to the moment and the experience that then allows us to take those steps. And, you're mentioning strategies and that really quick body scan. I'm mentioning here, in one of my children's books, which I know the superpower of your heart, and heart is an acronym, that H is health. And heart eventually, and we're not going to get into that here, but H is health, which is how are my body, breath, emotions, and thoughts in this moment, and how quickly we can just tune into that to give us some information. And there are some great other apps and resources for adults and kids that help to grow that as well. I know one of the apps, like How We Feel, is one that I've been really using lately. It's really wonderful. And I believe it's in connection to Dr. Brackett's work of Permission to Feel. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a really great resource. Just putting it out there too.
Yeah, I mean, we can go off on the subject of emotions because I'm like a little bit of a nerd about those too. But like, I think emotional literacy is so important, right? Even posting in your classroom a feelings wheel where you can start at the middle and you can identify like the basic emotion that I'm feeling, if I'm feeling scared or angry or something like that. And then as you go out in the different layers of the wheel toward the edge, it gets more and more refined. You know, then you choose between maybe three of them, and then you choose between at the edge between one and two. And I don't know how many emotions there are around the outside edge of a feelings wheel, but there's a number, right? And if so,
Yeah.
if kids and adults can actually tell you the differences among all those feelings, they are so much more in tune with themselves and can actually explain what they're feeling. And if you can explain what you're feeling now, there's a higher probability that you can then reflect on it later and figure out where it comes from. Right.
Yeah.
I was just having a conversation with my 27-year-old daughter the other day, and she was like, I was really angry and I like went out of my mind. And I'm like, well, you know, anger is a secondary emotion. So there was probably something underneath it. Something with your identity was triggered and you got defensive, right? And that's what the rage kick. Well, she didn't go to rage, but just the anger part.
Mm-hmm.
So was probably reflecting something else. My point here is that being able to name specifically how you feel and where that feeling comes from in your body and where it lands in your body is so very important because I mean that's what trauma is, right? Trauma is those incidences that happen in the past. Yes, they happened, right? But it's where it landed in your body and is still in your body. That's the trauma.
Mm-hmm. Ooh, and this was a lot right here. So actually, I'm going to invite the listeners for a moment just to pause and just thinking about here for a moment, just taking a mindful pause and perhaps even inviting the opportunity to even pause the recording and just jot down any thoughts that are coming. And there were already some resources there, which we will make sure are available in our notes. But there's so much here. Um, and I
How are
think,
you feeling right now?
yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like this moment, literally, and asking and noticing in the body, fully embodying this moment too, for that connection. Yeah. And I'm just going to mention again and highlight what Matt even just said about where are you feeling that in the body? Where did it land in the body? Um, when we're connecting throughout our day and our teaching and our leading, maybe that's a guiding question, an invitational practice here to notice. And something else that came up while you were sharing was Brene Brown's book, Atlas of the Heart. That is an amazing resource to continue to develop the emotional literacy. And we need to be able to name those emotions and understand where it is for that mindful self connection to go beyond just awareness. So we have the awareness, what is that emotion? But now what do I do with it? What is my action? And that sets the tone for then our other tree. That'll be another time, but the mindful self regulation. But
Yeah, because and I have it on my desk right here, the Atlas of the Heart. One of the things that she talks about there, it's kind of in an appendix, but I think it's one of the most powerful parts, and that is the idea of near enemies and far enemies. And so when I do work with people on emotional literacy, that's one of the concepts that I bring forward. Like, say you have the emotion of love, right? The far enemy would be its opposite. So that would be like hate, right? The near enemy. So what is closely aligned, like a synonym of love, but is an enemy, like not a good thing. So is it like enmeshment or entanglement,
Mhm.
right? Or obsessiveness, like where you become, it's more than love, it's too much.
Yeah. Wow. Yes. So, mentioning again for our listeners, wonderful resources to really see the nuances because all of them, the resources and the connections and the guidance that we have, all of that still connects back to the classroom. And you know, how does mindful self connection help teachers and leaders act, or instead of act, because I don't really like that word act because we're not faking acting. It's more like taking action or staying with integrity and intention. So how does this help teachers? Because right now it doesn't seem like it's connected to the classroom. So how can we bring that to the classroom?
Well, I think, and we're getting into words here. And as I also taught English, right? And I am a huge word nerd.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the word we're looking at right now is integrity.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so when we break that down, it's integration, it's integrity, like it's taking parts and creating something new. And so when we act with integrity, we are taking all the parts of ourselves, of our identity, our opinions, our values, all these things, and we are acting with one purpose that it's aligned to those things. Okay. Or I'm going to also use your other word. It's attuned to those things. And so it's, like sound or vibrations, right? So if, like, when you're playing your violin and you're playing with another instrument that's out of tune, the reason why it sounds wonky is because the sound waves get all jacked up because they're not in concert with each other,
Right.
right? And so when teachers have that mindful self connection, they are connected with their core, their identity and their values, and they are acting with integrity. And so that then allows them to be more grounded, more compassionate, to respond rather than react, right? All those things. And so when we are mindfully self aware, we are able to, it's like we are already inside ourselves. And so we are not, and so we are already positioned within ourselves. And so when we then respond, we are able to already be within our bodies, within our core, within our identity, within our values. I feel that if we react, which is quick, and we usually regret when we react, right? Because we're not in line with or in tune with ourselves. It's more like we're a third person, like we're standing on a bridge and the river that is ourselves is running underneath us, and we're just like throwing things into the river, and that's how we're reacting. And it's not, we're not actually speaking from our true selves,
Mm.
right? And so I don't know, I just feel like when we can be mindfully self-aware, we come from a deeper place. We can respond from our true selves, and there is less opportunity for us to be regretful and have to apologize and make excuses and backpedal.
Yeah, I mean, especially when behaviors happen in our classrooms or, we're in our teams and in a conversation and, maybe you have a different idea for a project that you're working on with your team for the next unit or whatnot. And somehow there's this friction that happens. And so if we aren't in the space of mindful self connection, then the reactivity happens, and like what you shared, often there is regret after what we've said, and then that damages the relationships. And so, I mean, when we take that step back, whether we're on that bridge or even in our framework, we have that mountain, and you can take that step back on and become present and see, okay, here's a better option. Here's the next step. And also have that compassion and take that next restorative option if needed as well, so that we can move forward, whether in our classrooms or in our teams or with families, our staff, all of that.
Yeah, when I was a new teacher, I was always trying to be the teacher next door,
Mm.
right? And so I would respond to classroom behaviors, good or bad, not from me, but from what I thought I should be,
Mm.
right? I was not mindfully self-connected as a new teacher. So, and I think I see that in other new teachers as well. They try so hard to emulate the veteran teacher who's super popular or the administration likes or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
so.
Yeah, well, there's a few things from there. One, pulling forward this should. And for all of our listeners, if we notice that we are shoulding ourselves, let's not.
Let's not.
Let's just not. And then the other piece is you're reminding me again of that modeling into embodying. So it's good to have, whether a new teacher or a veteran teacher, it's good to have models and inspiration. But then how can those qualities be seen from the mountain and then integrated into ourselves for who we get to be in our own voice? And you've mentioned true self several times during this time. How can we be so mindfully connected within that we show up as our true self with integrity? So those are really powerful things to be reflecting about today. And, when we try to do those different things, barriers tend to come up. So I'm curious, what barriers have you noticed prevent educators and leaders from practicing mindful self connection?
Oh my gosh, Lindsay, you hear it all the time, right? Time, pressure, um, chronic stress, what we physically bring to the situation, in our own bodies. It could be health issues, it could be family that's we bring into the space. It could be emotional overload. It could be um, coming from wherever you are in your capacity that you have. Um, it could be school culture. Maybe you're in a school where the culture is not, you're not vibing
Important.
with the culture, right?
Yeah. Yes, definitely. I've been there.
Yeah, I mean, I
Hard.
have too, and that's probably the main reason why people leave
Yeah.
a school and transfer somewhere else, right?
True
And
story. Yeah, I feel that.
yeah,
And actually, before moving to that next layer of that question and thought, I'm actually going to invite our listeners just this pause again, whether pausing this episode or just holding a space for a moment and think to yourself, what are some barriers to you that might be coming up that are preventing you from fully connecting to your mindful self and having that connection within? And just a moment here, whether pause if you need longer time or our time here. There's always something that is a barrier, because when we can identify it, we then can move and find a way. So if you wish, taking one more breath in and a breath out. And then, yeah, Matt, is there anything else like with those barriers that you've noticed, maybe a way forward? And maybe there are some
couple strategies that you're looking for.
yeah, some strategies or resources that you can recommend.
Yeah, so what I usually tell people is, oh, there's so much here. Um, this is where you really need a toolbox, to use the cliche of strategies, whether it's um, how to have difficult conversations, right? Whether it's time management, whether it's knowing what your locus of control is, what's in your, what can you control, which is only one thing, right? That's yourself. what you can influence.
Wait, can you say that again? What can we control?
One thing, Lindsay,
And
one
that
thing,
is,
and that is yourself.
that's right. Just a good reminder for all of us to hear.
Yes. And then the next sphere would be your sphere of influence, and depending on what your position is and your proximity to power, like that determines your sphere of influence. But then there's a whole lot of things outside of your control at all or influence. And that's where worry comes from. Like worry is obsessing about future events that are outside of your control. Right. And so it's really easy for me to then say, well, why worry? Like you can't worry about that. But guess what? We worry because what we do. I don't know why we worry.
Because we're human.
Because
And
we're human.
worry, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just an emotion and it's a charge that then we can move through the body. And that's why we need to have our connection so we can move through it instead of store it.
So you can name it and let it go through. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and mentioning some of those strategies that might be needed for conversations and staying present to yourself, like having the restorative practices conversations, or there's like the compassionate conversations, or like the nonviolent communication NVC process, those types of resources that are available when we have different relationships where we have to stay present. And um, are there other kinds of resources that are coming to mind, or practical strategies that can help us continue to tune in and that maybe we can even practice here?
Um, One thing that I've been involved a lot with recently is just boundaries.
Mm,
Understanding what a boundary is, the difference between a boundary and an expectation, right? And then the three steps of boundaries, which is figuring out what they are, first of all, and then communicating them. So the first step would be defining them. The second step would be communicating them. And then the third step, which is the one that we never really get to, is the defending them. So
mm,
once your boundary is crossed, like you say, I'm not going to answer emails after 4 p.m., right? But somebody then, a parent emails you at 4:30 p.m. on a Friday. What do you do?
mm,
Right. And it's best to figure out what your strategy is going to be when people cross your boundaries before it actually happens. Because when a boundary is crossed, there is emotion involved, right?
mm,
That is an emotionally laden situation. And so you just want to have that response on a shelf metaphorical shelf, where you can pull it down and put it out there in the world, right? And so, because otherwise, you're probably going to be having that regret that we talked about earlier come in, right? Because you're reacting rather than responding.
mhm. Yeah. And you're reminding me of a book, and it may have been the book that you may have recommended that we read over summer, and it was the Set Boundaries, Find Peace. And I can't remember the author, but I know that's the title. There's a subtitle, but I will look that up and I will put it in the notes as well. But that was a really powerful book. And for our listeners here in our mindful community within our membership, you can find our book study, our book club from the summer, and engage even. Yes. So who's the Nedra Glover? What's her
So,
last? So that's a really great resource, to look at. And then also, I was pulling out here, we have a card deck that has basically, so our card deck is our educator and leader embodiment cards. And there are particular cards that correspond with practices to the trees in our framework. And so there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's at least 6 practices that can be integrated if you're looking for another simple way of developing this skill in the community that you're serving for our listeners here today. Um, yeah, wow. We've definitely traveled pretty far with this topic today, and I'm just curious: are there any other resources, thoughts, messages that you feel are still on the heart before we start moving into like our closing space here?
One thing that I think is really important when we're talking about mindful self connection is that everyone needs a personal practice. I would love for every teacher prep program at the undergraduate level to require some kind of course where people start a practice. And it could be anything, right? It could be as simple as setting a daily intention. It could be something as simple as learning breath work and then practicing it so that it becomes a habit. It could be meditation. It could be yoga, which is, connecting your breath and your intention to body movement. It could be, I don't know, there's any number of things, but I think it's important to have a personal practice that you do every day on the good days, so that when it's the bad day, you're not like, oh, I need to do some breath work. But then your body's going to be like, Matt, what are you doing right now? Like, that's one more thing I can't handle because your body's not attuned to it. And it doesn't fall into the natural rhythm like, oh, okay, Matt's doing he's getting us relaxed with whatever it is, or focused or whatever. So I think if I could have everybody in the world do one thing, it would be to have some kind of personal practice. I don't care what it is, but something that allows them it gives them the space and the time and the freedom and the skills to go within themselves on a daily. A daily would be great, but and it can even be like 5 minutes, right? Just
Right.
because I sit down and meditate for 30 minutes a day doesn't mean that everyone else has to.
Right. Yeah, and I always like to think of creating plans of like bronze, silver, and gold, or level one, level two, level
Oh yeah.
three, so
Mm-hmm.
that on certain days you have certain practices for yourself to do. And I think that's one of our cards too. I don't, there is a card in there that helps support that. That's also why in our micro credential program, it is a part of the program that you have to establish a personal practice for a set period of time. I think it's at least I think it's 4 to 6 months at minimum, so that you're able to integrate the different personal practices, because that all cultivates our mindful self connection. And also within our framework, one of the raindrops is the mindful or the well-being practices. So we have 4 core practices. That's one of them. And so we need to make sure that our well being is nurtured along the way every day, somehow. Even synchronizing, I always like to share this one. This one was always my favorite because as a special educator and also as a district wide climate and SEL coach, like I was constantly transitioning. So whenever I would walk, I would synchronize my walking and breathing. That is a well-being practice that is integrated in what I'm doing in the time that I had to give that still regulated my system. So all of those different pieces, and also mentioning here as an organization, every month we have our community circles. That is a community of practice. So even if it's once a month, it's something that then continues to sustain throughout, the rest of the month, and maybe choosing one small practice. For example, like I said, these cards, you can even choose one and do that same practice every day with your students, with your staff, and with yourself. All of the different layers can have that, and that is an amazing recommendation that I also endorse. That all undergraduate programs, all programs, really need to have, because that's how we're going to thrive as a human, mindful global citizens, which is our ultimate goal here, is becoming a mindful global citizen space. So, and that's not just in the classroom. We are
Yeah, and
humans
I
outside of
think
the classroom.
it's really important because change happens, right?
Yeah.
Um, there's some quote about the rate of change will never be as slow as it is today.
Mm.
I totally butchered it, but so change is happening faster and faster. And so my fear, like with AI is supposed to take some of these repetitive tasks away and streamline our life, right? And so what are we going to fill that with? Not rest and relaxation. That's not the human way.
Mm.
It's not the Western culture way. We're going to fill it with something else, some other work, some other task that's just going to be one more thing that our poor nervous systems aren't going to be able to keep up with. And so it is of vital importance that everyone have some kind of mindful connection, self connection practice now, because this craziness is only going to get worse.
Yeah. Yeah, gosh, again, we could always continue. I have to share a couple things with that. And then, maybe we'll have a part two or something. um, um, we did do a mindful AI summit as an organization. I believe it was last year, which I don't know whenever our listeners are listening to this, but there is a recording of that if you want to connect further, because there is an intersectionality of how AI, mindfulness, and education all come together, and how mindfulness-based learning supports that. Um, Mentioning how the resiliency that is also why we have mindful self-connection and all of the competencies as trees, because trees are resilient no matter the storm. We know that when the storms come, as they will, that the roots grow bigger and stronger, and so do the trunks. Actually, science, as you know, a science person,
Yeah.
that there's science that proves that. And we go through seasons. And so, as trees, we can do that, and it still is all a part of the ecosystem. And the last thing that, just kind of mentioning in connection, is the importance of what is truth to us. And we know that through feeling in the body and having a mindful self connection. So, as technology or as the new curriculum or as this or as that continues to come forward, especially in education, when we can pause and truly feel that mindful self connection within, we will be able to know and actually know what to do next and trust the process and what unfolds from that. So, anything else you wish
Perfect,
to
Lindsay.
share?
No, that's great.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, as we start moving to our closing for some next steps for our members, we will continue this conversation in our member online community. And each week this month, we'll post a reflection question. And by sharing your own insights and responding to a peers, you can earn professional development hours. And you can learn more at educatingmindfully.org/learncast. We will also release a companion voices blog and a mindfulness-based learning lesson inspiration, so that this continues to support growing your mindful self-connection within and beyond the classroom, and how you can see that applies in your classroom across grade levels. And so, just inviting another pause here for one more moment, and commit to one action that you can take, and just allowing this opportunity to extend the experience into your life. Even if you need to pause the LearnCast episode, just making one commitment. And then just taking an invitational breath if you wish, in and out. And thank you all for joining us today. And especially thank you to Matt Weld. Thank you so much for sharing space together. And, may we all become mindful global citizens within and beyond the classroom. And just thank you. Thanks again.
Oh, thank you, Lindsay. Appreciate the opportunity.
All right, take care for now, everybody. Be well.
We hope this episode inspires you to take action as a mindful leader and educator. As we close, we invite you to pause where you are for an invitational breathing practice. Maybe placing one hand at your heart and/or one hand on your stomach, and together we will take 4 collective breaths, integrating our learning, 1 breath for each ripple within our framework's educational ecosystem. First and foremost, breathing for ourselves. Inhale. Exhale. Next, breathing in for our staff. Inhale. Exhale. Third, breathing in for our students. Inhale. Sipping a little bit more air for our students. Exhale. And finally, breathing in for our worldwide community. Take the biggest inhale yet. Exhale. Consider pausing and committing a collective intention together by saying, we are mindful global citizens. We invite you to continue this conversation with us and our member online community. Learn more about our nonprofit's LearnCast membership and our mindfulness-based learning micro-credential program at www.educatingmindfully.org. My name is Dee DuBose, and on behalf of our leadership team, we thank you for learning with us as we collectively do our parts to make schools and Mother Earth better than we found it. Have a great day on purpose. Peace.